So guys, as you can see, bonsai is one of my favorite hobbies, and I've been doing it for nearly 30 years, and I really enjoy it. I've had successes and I've had failures. I think everybody who's honest who grows bonsai will tell you they've had some of them die. Now, Americans tend to say bonsai, and I have some Japanese friends, and my wife is actually Japanese, and she's often corrected me and told me the proper way to say bonsai, which is the way I started out saying, is bonsai. But I'm going to give you some tips. I'm not going to create a huge video today, but I could talk about bonsai for hours and hours. But I'm going to give you 3 bonsai that I think that you should grow. They're super easy to grow, and some tips on how to keep them healthy, and some mistakes to avoid losing your bonsai that unfortunately I've made those over the years. So this particular bonsai is a boxwood, and it's a very unique boxwood, and a lot of people think that this boxwood, which is Kingsville, comes from Japan. It actually does not. I believe I read that it was discovered in Connecticut by a nurseryman at a nursery in Connecticut, and it has extremely small leaves. I don't know if you can see it, but I have a normal standard boxwood that you find in most people's landscapes in America, and I happened to find that at a nursery that had been sitting at the back of this nursery probably for decades, and no one had ever bought it because it wasn't really a great looking plant, but I saw the potential in it because of the trunk structure of it, and I really liked it. But this one, believe it or not, this one actually came from eBay. They shipped it to me. They had cut the root ball down to the size of a golf ball. This tree nearly died, and I've had it for going on about 12 or 13 years. It's been a great tree, and I really like it. I've even named it after my wife, and I named it after her first name, and that's what I call it based on this tree. But I've had it. It's been very healthy, and I'm going to tell you some ways to keep it alive. But before I do that, I'm going to give you 2 other species of trees that I think would be really easy to grow for you if you follow my general steps on keeping your bonsai alive. Now, after saying that Kingsville is easy to grow, there's one that's even easier for me, and that is Procumbens juniper. I have lots of juniper, and I think this particular juniper is probably approaching 50 years, if not older than 50 years. I've had it probably for 20 years, and I've kept it very healthy by following a few things that I do, and even one thing that most experts say don't do, but I'll tell you about that in a second. But this is Procumbens juniper, and sometimes you'll see it in gardening magazines as Japanese garden juniper. It grows relatively slowly, but it's a very tough tree. It can tolerate some really tough conditions. So this, I think, out of the 3 trees I think is easiest to grow, this might be number 1, and the Kingsville boxwood number 2. Now, when I mentioned there's one rule I break that a lot of experts say don't do, is don't allow your bonsai to stand in water. In this particular tree, all summer long and all winter long in the greenhouse, it actually stands in about 1/4 to close to 1/2 an inch of water in these lunchroom trays that I purchased off of eBay. It's called a humidity tray in the bonsai world. It helps keep moisture, but these trees I've discovered, and I've got a whole row of them on the top of Kingsville boxwoods, but what I've discovered is if they dry out, they die very quickly. In the greenhouse, even in the wintertime, we can have a couple of warm days. It can get quite warm in here. So I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm just saying this is what I do. I let my bonsai, especially the small ones, sit in these trays to make sure that the roots always have moisture. I never had root rot. I've occasionally had one of my Kingsville to die, and that's usually 99.9% of the time is because it dried out. The other time is when a squirrel or animal came in and knocked it off the shelf, and I didn't realize it. It was actually under my shelf where I keep all my Kingsville. So again, that's a rule that I commonly break, but I do it and it works for me. And like I said, I've been doing bonsai for almost 30 years, and in the last 20, I've had minimal to die from anything that I believe was root rot. I think most of the time it was lack of water than too much water. Now, this is the third tree type that I think is very easy to grow, and I've had this tree for 20 years. It was almost this exact same size. It's definitely matured since I've had it, and the ramification or the branch structure has gotten a lot better. But I'm holding this whiteboard there so you can see how incredibly healthy this is. Now, currently, I know it looks sick or dying, but this is January, and this tree has lost all its leaves. Even in my greenhouse, it gets close to 30, and it's normal for this Japanese maple to lose its leaves. So this particular variety is called Sharp's Pygmy. It's hard to find these. They're quite expensive if you can find them, but for me, it's been very easy to grow. In Japan, these are often called mountain maples because they grow up under the canopy of other trees. And so my recommendation on these type of trees is to don't have them in full sun. Only morning sun, not afternoon, not midday. I find they perform very well. This gets a little bit of sun in the morning. Every year it comes back and it almost has a fluorescent green leaf. I'll try to find a picture of it. I don't think I have one handy on my phone, but if I can find one, I'll put it up on the screen. But Sharp's Pygmy is the third of the three my favorite types, and also easy to grow. So I think the number one thing that kills bonsai when people get one is they allow it to completely dehydrate, and that is a terrible thing to do because you have to keep the roots moist. Once they dry out, some trees can go into shock in the summertime and die quickly. So that's why I recommend using the lunchroom trays as a moisture basin, as a way for roots to get water when they need it, and a humidity tray for the rest of the trees for that humidity to go up around the tree. If you live in a dry area, that's really important. So watering is critical, and the way I water, I have an irrigation system I installed myself, and initially I just had an overspray, but that wasn't enough. I noticed the trees were not performing well. There was not enough water getting to the root system, even though they had the humidity trays below them. So what I started using is micro irrigation system. You run this type of tubing, hook it up to this little emitter right here, and you can cut it on or off. You can cut it to full. You can actually take the top off and just it'll shoot a little stream of water up and give it just enough water every day. Now, if you don't have your own irrigation system, I would recommend getting something like this that you could hook up to your hose pipe. This is a timer. You're going to have to get water to your bonsai depending on what environment you live in, what zone. You need to make sure that the roots don't dry out, at least not for more than 24 hours. Once that passes, you may have a tree that starts dying quickly. So again, an irrigation timer if you don't have a system. These micro irrigation emitters, you can put about 6 or 7 in each zone. This has multi-zones, or you can get them that have 4, 5, or even 6 zones, depending on how many plants you have. I said this has multiple zones, but I do have others like this that you hook up to your hose that have multiple zones. This just has one zone, so you could water a lot of bonsai in one area, maybe 10, 15. But I would start with one, something simple like the 3 that I mentioned, and just make sure you take care of it well. Now, some people ask about fertilization. There was a famous German bonsai artist, and I read in a book, I've got many, many books from him, but I think his name was Walter, but I cannot remember his last name. But he said, someone asked him what type of fertilizer you buy, and a lot of people think you have to have specialized fertilizer. His answer to that was whatever is on sale. In other words, he buys whatever fertilizer there is at his local hardware or wherever he buys his fertilizer. It doesn't have to be specialty bonsai fertilizer. I find that I've been growing bonsai, like I said, for close to 30 years, and I've never once bought a bonsai specialty fertilizer, and they're all quite healthy and doing well. I just use things like this, Schultz. It's really good for root development. You can get this online. I'll put a link in the description. Again, everything that I've talked about, from the timers to the hose, everything I'll put in the description. Also, it's not a bad idea, and I know this is really hard for everyone to do, to water frequently, so having this type of system really makes it easy. But if you can just once a week, in addition to your automatic watering system, is water it with a gentle rain watering wand like this. This has hundreds of little holes in it, and just puts a very gentle watering on the top that can wash off pollution and dust that can collect on the leaves, and it really helps the health of the plant. So this is like a once a week watering I do, but it's not to keep it alive, it's just to help it become even more vigorous. So the thing that does keep it alive is the daily watering by this system. And by the way, this system only waters each bonsai I have for 1 to 2 minutes. Like, let's say May, it may be just watering once a day. June, July, August, and some of September, it may be watering 2 times a day. So that's why I'm making sure that it never completely dehydrates. Once your bonsai dehydrates, there's a very good chance that it could die from that shock of not having water. So it just happens. So guys, as you can see, this is one side of my greenhouse. I have the same number of bonsai on the opposite side. Some of them are a little bit smaller, referring to those Kingsvilles. But I've become obsessed with bonsai over the last 25 to 30 years, and I love them. It all started with a movie that most people know, The Karate Kid Part 1 and 2, where they showed Mr. Miyagi working on bonsai trees. So I found it fascinating, and I just became more and more interesting. I've been to Japan a few times and actually made it to the International Bonsai Museum. It's incredible. Those bonsai, one of them are over 1,000 years old. So it's like a hobby. It's not a pet that's going to last for 10 or 15 years, then it's over. Some of these trees will easily outlive me if they're taken care of. So if you decide you want to get into bonsai, the best advice I can give you is learn as much as you can, either from YouTube, books, or whatever. Take a class, go to your local clubs that may be in your city or town, and learn as much as you can about bonsai. You'll really enjoy it, especially when you see them really flourishing and growing. And sometimes you can actually buy too many bonsai, as I've done. So one last point about bonsai is you don't have to have a lot of space like this. You can have a very small space to work with bonsai, and you can start out with something like this. Again, Kingsville boxwood. This will fit in the palm of your hand. These are often called either shohin or mame. I think the mame is the smallest of the smallest. So this may be more like shohin, palm-sized bonsai. So if you enjoy growing something like this, start out small and then you can work your way up to a much larger tree. So if you have any questions about this video, or if you want me to make more videos about bonsai, please let me know in the comments. If you have a question, please become a public subscriber first, because I like to put those ahead of everyone else. I get hundreds of comments a week and many questions, and it's hard for me to answer them all when I have so much to do in my yard and greenhouse. So if you do that, I really would appreciate it. So guys, have a great day, and I hope you enjoyed the video.